This is the TD Fitness Podcast with Coach T, episode number 30.
Welcome to the TD Fitness Podcast, giving you ways to live a healthy lifestyle without giving up the things that make life worth living. And now your host, certified health coach and personal trainer, Coach T.
What's up, guys? Coach T here, coming back at you, this time with episode number 30. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about my intermittent fasting experiment and give you some tips on following your own meal plan. You know, there's a lot of chatter about intermittent fasting. So I hope to clarify a bit through my 12-week experiment with it. But this isn't just an intermittent fasting episode. I wanted to broaden the topic to the way we eat. And that's because the way we eat influences so much of how we feel, and the way we live influences how we eat. So we're going to talk about dieting and meal plans today, and I'll provide a few tips for your consideration. But let's start with intermittent fasting. What is it? What did I do in my fasting efforts? And I want to give you some of my observations with that. So intermittent fasting is essentially the practice of occasionally going for extended periods without eating. It means a lot of different things to different people, and it's not really anything new, and it's not a magical approach to weight loss, and it's not for some elite group of nutrition experts. We all do some form of intermittent fasting every day. We call it sleeping. Now, there are many ways to fast, right? You could go a day on, day off. I've seen all of these techniques. You could do 12 hours each day. There's a 5-to-2 ratio they have where you consume 500 to 600 calories for 2 days a week, and then whatever you want on the other days of the week. Maybe you'll have no breakfast on some days, just caffeine drinks, unsweetened, things like that, like green tea. It curbs your appetite. You could have your first meal at 10 o'clock, your last meal at 6 p.m. I mean, there's so many ways to go about this. And as I think about it, it's really similar to interval training. You know, there aren't really any wrong ways to do it. I mean, you essentially mix intensity with rest when you perform intervals, right? Well, here you mix fasting periods with periods where you're not fasting, where you can eat. So you do what you can and push yourself in a way that you can handle. It's very easy to cater it to you. Now, I can't speak to the validity or the difficulty of the different types of fasting or the different approaches to fasting that I mentioned, but I can tell you what I did. So if you remember at the beginning of the year, in episode number 16, I talked about some of my new habits for the new year. And one of those was to try to see just how I feel when going without breakfast for a while, because I found that what I was doing was eating breakfast out of a habit, not because I was hungry. So I tried that for a while, and essentially that meant I was fasting for about 12 hours each day. From the time I stopped eating the night before until the next day, it happened to be at least 12 hours every day. And then during Lent, I decided to step it up a little bit. You know, I was like, well, I've been doing 12 hours every day. Let me see just how far I can go with this and really push myself for a number of reasons, you know, spiritually, mentally, physically, and from an education standpoint. I kind of wanted to see what would happen. So what I did was the first 2 weeks of Lent, I fasted for 13 hours every day. The next 2 weeks, I increased that to 14 hours, again, every day. The next week, I did for 15 hours. And the final week of Lent, I fasted for 16 hours every single day. Now, I'll give you some of the results and some of my observations from that. And like I said, for me, it had a mental, a physical, and kind of a spiritual aspect to it, right? And there were aspects that I learned in each one of those domains. Spiritually, absolutely had or gained more of an appreciation for sacrifice and going without. I typically hadn't made any type of significant efforts in previous years during the Easter season to kind of sacrifice in that regard. So I felt like that was something that I absolutely was a benefit to me and something I learned through fasting. And then like any diet, when it comes to the mental and physical side of things, intermittent fasting or any type of approach to changing your diet, it makes you pay a little more attention to what and when you're eating. And that's a good thing, because it certainly caused me to think about what I eat and drink. For example, I'm a chai tea kind of guy, and that is a sweeter drink. Maybe not as sweet as some of the very sweetened coffee drinks or tea drinks, but I found that I thought about whether or not I actually needed that, for example, in the morning. So many times I would just have black coffee if I drank any kind of caffeine at all. I'm not really one to have caffeine every day, but there are some days that I like to have caffeine. So I would just have black coffee, maybe with a little bit of honey or a little bit of cream or milk in it. Fasting also caused me to cut out the excess sugary drinks throughout the day. And I'm not the kind of person that drinks a lot of soda or anything like that. But again, when those situations come up, if you go to a restaurant or something and you want a sweet tea or a soda with your meal, again, it's something that you think about because you're in the mindset of fasting, even though you're not fasting at that particular moment. So for me, the fasting helped also cut out nighttime snacking. And that was a huge benefit for me because I consumed fewer calories, right? And it was definitely beneficial in the sense that I would literally calculate or try to calculate the amount of time that I would have to go without eating. So after I finish dinner, say it's 6:30 at night, okay, I look at my watch and I'm like, okay, I can't eat until, if I was on a 14-hour week, I couldn't eat until 8:30 the next day, right? And if I had something at 9, a snack, watching TV or something with my wife, then that reset my clock. And that was another 14 hours. So I was very cognizant of that. So that has a tendency to cut the nighttime snacking and nip that in the bud because you want to finish your eating earlier rather than later. As one of the points of feedback that I've heard from intermittent fasting when people who do it, they do the long fasts like the 24 hours and things like that, was energy levels tend to drop. And I'll tell you, my energy levels seemed fine throughout. Although I didn't do an extremely long fast. Again, I stuck to a max of 16 hours. I would say that during some of the longer fasts, like that last week, the 16-hour fasts, I found that those were about my limit when you're doing it on a daily basis. I tend to get a little bit cranky when around the 16-hour point. On one occasion, I seemed to have a headache that could have just been attributed to some dehydration, maybe. But my mental acuity, my performance all seemed fine. My energy levels did not tend to seem to drop at all. It also helped me to at least feel like I was in better control of my life when it came to nutrition. I didn't feel bound by hunger. Instead, I felt like that was something that I could control, and that is very empowering. So definitely benefit in that regard. I didn't find that 12 to 16 hours of fasting was overly restrictive either. It didn't inhibit me from going out and having fun or having dinner with friends and things like that. I just had to plan for it and understand that, if I stayed out late or went to a late movie with my wife and we had a snack, then it was later in the day, probably not until after lunch, that I could eat the next day, and that was okay. And I also found that the hunger pangs subside after a while. And I had read this. So you may be hungry, when you wake up in the morning or midway through the morning before lunch, before you eat. But that hunger actually goes away. It's a temporary feeling. And that gets to some of the psychological versus the physical hunger that I'll talk about here in a little bit. But the $1 million question that I think everybody wonders is, does it work? And specifically, does it work for weight loss? And I'll tell you, I'll give it a soft yes. And here's the reason I say that. So I definitely noticed more definition in my abdominal region. Definitely more defined there. And I actually measured myself, and my tape measurement was smaller than it was about a year before. Same time of year during the same time period, if you will. But I could definitely see the definition in my abs. So the question is why did that work? If it was indeed, the fasting that did it, was it because of a restricted calorie input? Maybe partly, but for me, it's also, I believe, because of the insulin response that we talked about in episode number 29. Remember, your hormones play such a huge role in weight gain, weight loss, weight maintenance. So because there weren't as many spikes throughout the day and night due to me taking in food, that tended to have a lowering effect on insulin levels, I believe. I did not do blood work, so this is all just my observation, but I tend to believe that is part of what was going on. And again, like I brought up earlier, there was also an increased awareness of my diet in general. So because you're in this period of fasting over the course of a number of weeks or months, you're not constantly, but you're less apt to forget about or you're less apt to forget about the food that you're consuming. It's more in the forefront. You have fitness and health and fasting on the mind, even if it's not in the forefront, right? So that causes an increased awareness, and that again is a good thing. Also, I'll tell you what else I was eating during the day on most days. So most days where I went to work and worked throughout the day and then came home, that was a majority of the days over that 3-month period. I did a little bit of travel, but mainly I was putting in regular work days. So there is a salad shop right by where I work, and I love that place. So every day for lunch, I was eating a salad, and it was a pretty big salad, I'll tell you. So, but it was a salad nonetheless. So the point is, when you consider the fact that I essentially wasn't eating much of anything during the morning, sometimes on the shorter fasting periods, I would have an apple or something like that. Then I'd have a salad for lunch and maybe some almonds as a snack midday. That was it until dinner. And then when you cut out the things after dinner, no snacking, I mean, that you're probably going to lose weight, right? I'll tell you too, though, that my workout efforts did suffer. I don't think because of the fasting, but just because it was such a busy time in my life. The past 3 months have been very busy. So that is something to consider, particularly when we think about the fact that it's hard to make large changes in your lifestyle when it comes to diet and exercise. It's hard to make multiple changes at the same time. So it could be, I haven't thought about this until now actually, but it could be that because I was focused, my attention was focused on the fasting piece, I just didn't have the bandwidth to stay consistent with my exercising. So that's something to consider too. And that's one of the things that we talk about from a health coaching perspective. You want to pick a time where, when it comes to making changes in your life, you want to pick a time where you're not overly stressed and you don't want to try to make too many changes at the same time. One thing I will say about the fasting is that, again, it required planning, and that is hard for many of us. I am a planner by personality type, by career, by training. I mean, all I do is plan in my personal and professional life. My wife will tell you that. And I understand that is not everyone's thing. Not everyone is a planner. But that is absolutely something that I found I had to consider when it comes to intermittent fasting. So like I said, it's not for everyone. Particularly pregnant women, those with medical conditions such as diabetes or eating disorders, females in general, you need to be careful with intermittent fasting if you're going to do this. If you're highly stressed, if you're obese, those are some situations where you may want to seek professional advice before embarking on any kind of fasting protocol. So seek out a registered dietitian, maybe even a physician. They might be able to help you out there too. But if you are thinking about doing it, here's some things to consider. You should choose a fasting regimen that best fits your lifestyle and your health history and your ability to sustain the fast. Again, this is about you, right? Don't try to take someone else's model and plug and play and stick it in your life, because it's going to be hard and it probably won't work. All right. If you don't think you can fast for 24 hours twice a week, then don't try to do that just because somebody else did it. If you can only go 8 hours and that's better than what you're doing now, if you're trying intermittent fasting, then go for it. Secondly, protein and fiber-rich foods are going to help to keep you full and satiated and satisfied. And that's important, particularly when your calories are limited. Healthy fats like nuts, peanut butter, those things also curb your hunger, but understand that they provide more calories as well. But the healthy fats and the peanut butters, the polyunsaturated fats, those types of things, they aren't bad for you. So again, calories aren't bad. So it's okay to consume some of those things. Adequate hydration is key, and that is something that I did maintain. I've been very consistent with my water intake. I have a 33 ounce water container here that I carry with me. I have a couple other ones too, and I just try to drink 3 of those a day. So that gets me about 100 ounces a day, and that keeps me pretty well hydrated. Also, when you're fasting, you don't want to compensate with junk food, right? So you don't want to defeat the purpose of your fasting and ingest or take in a lot of stuff that's bad for you. So just keep that in mind. Realize too that hunger is not an emergency. Sometimes we think it is, but it's not really. There's the physical hunger and the psychological hunger. And this is what I alluded to a little while ago. When I was young, I remember when I was a small child, I used to tell my dad, I'm hungry, can I eat? And my father's response was always, son, you don't know what hunger is. And I didn't understand what he was saying then. Now I understand what he's saying. I mean, there are people that in the world that are literally hungry. What we typically experience, what I've typically experienced, is that I wanted to eat, but I wasn't necessarily hungry. A lot of times when people think they're hungry, they're not experiencing that true physiological hunger, which is through your body, but rather it's a psychological or a hunger that's in your head. So it's important to know the difference in that, and important to understand your body's signals in that regard. Even when I was doing the intermittent fasting, I'll say that, that was all primarily in my head. So that wasn't true hunger. That was just me wanting to eat, So the takeaway is that intermittent fasting can be good, but I don't think it's necessary for everyone, and maybe not even necessary to lose weight. There are so many other approaches that you can follow when it comes to a healthy diet for your lifestyle. So I'll continue to do the intermittent fasting though, because I did like the way I felt. I like the way, I like the extra definition, and I thought that it was something that was doable. And again, it kept nutrition on the forefront of my mind. So I'm not going to go the 16-hour route, but what I'm going to try to do is 14-hour fast on 5 days of the week. That seems to be what's working for me right now. It may not work for you though, but here are some things to consider with dieting or following a meal plan in general, your approach to dieting, if you will. It doesn't have to be fasting. Like I said, I want to zoom out a little bit and talk a little bit bigger picture about some of the other concepts, some of the other things to consider here. So the first consideration is that no matter how motivated you are, it can be tough to follow a diet or a meal plan. And I want you to know that that is normal, because life gets in the way, and you don't want your meal plan to prevent you from enjoying life. If you look at it a different way, if you look at it as a way to enhance your lifestyle or to gradually change your lifestyle for the better, that's a little bit easier to chew on, right? And yes, that's pun intended. Think about what you're already eating though, and how you could make that a little bit better. And that's why I love that's what I love about our registered dietitian partners over at Better Nutrition. They talk about better, not perfect, better, not best. Okay. The second consideration I want you to think about is that most of the meal plans and diets on the market aren't developed with sustainability in mind. So they're intended to get quick results so that they will sell. The short-term approach does not really bode well for us in the long term. So the most effective diets, though, are the long-term way of life type of diets, the ones that are ongoing, the ones that include support systems along the way. Those are the ones with the longer view in mind, and that's what I would kind of steer you towards. In order to make a sustainable change, the changes really need to be small and based on what you're already doing. So taking small steps from where you are right now, making small changes and improvements to what you already normally eat and already enjoy. Again, just one small step at a time. So don't look at eating healthier as black and white. Like, I can't do this anymore, I have to do this now. Think about it as a spectrum of healthier options and less healthy options. And then just try to move the scale further along to the healthier end. The third consideration I want to bring up is another way to think about it is to get rid of the meal plan or diet term altogether. You know, people define diet in many different ways. When I refer to dieting, I typically mean the way that you eat now. If I say you should improve your diet, that means you should improve the way you eat. It doesn't necessarily mean go buy one of the diets on the market. And the meal plan implies that it's temporary, really, and no one wants to follow a meal plan forever. So it's physically difficult and psychologically difficult. If you're on a diet, the traditional definition of a diet or meal plan, then that's fine. Just understand that there's a greater role. It has a greater role in your life, and it's really a long-term view that you want to take. Most importantly, though, I want you to figure out how to fit your way of eating or your diet into your life, not the other way around. When we try to change our lifestyles and schedules to fit around a meal plan, we are figuratively biting off more than we can chew. There's another diet pun for you. It's full of those in this episode, huh? But seriously, imagine yourself trying to alter your life to fit around a diet. I mean, people do that all the time and wonder why it's so hard to stick to it, right? No, here's what I want you to do. Make small changes in what you're doing now and build on that. That's how you incorporate long-term healthy change. So I gradually stepped up my intermittent fasting efforts, for example, from 12 to 13 to 14 to 15 to 16 hours. And I understood that 16 and 15 hours, that was a bit much. So I scaled it back to 14. That's what I'm going to maintain going forward. Intermittent fasting is something that I feel like I can sustain. You know, we can call it intermittent fasting, but now it's just a normal part of my routine, right? So on 5 days a week, again, I'll limit my diet to the 10 hours of intake and 14 hours of fasting. And that's a general guideline that I intend to follow based on what I've learned from my little experiment. It won't control my life, but it provides some structure. And I feel like without structure or a framework to bounce up against, we kind of flounder. So again, that's an example of taking something and making it fit to your life, but not trying to bend your life around this pattern that you feel like you have to follow. So some of the practical steps, if you will, for implementing or improving your diet. Number one, I mentioned it already, start small, one step at a time. So pick one habit to focus on for just a limited period of time. Some of the examples I use from the Fit Life program that I provide: drink more water, consume fruits and vegetables, control your calorie intake, increase your fiber intake, your healthy protein intake, and limit things like unhealthy fats, processed foods, added sugars, extra sodium, and control your portion sizes. Those are all some of the examples of small habits that you can focus on in the short term, again, one at a time, to start to improve your dietary practices. You also want to add changes slowly. You want to be patient. So when you do that, you'll start to understand what is easier for you and what's harder, and then continue to build on those things that are easy, and then take the slower road on the things that are harder. Don't try to force yourself, again, to do something that's extremely hard. Make that hard thing easier, or take a longer time to reach the goal of that hard change you're trying to make. Remember, everything is hard though before it's easy. All right. So just do what works for you. And then finally, I'd tell you to enjoy your food. You know, we tend to get wrapped around all the things we can and can't do and what we should and shouldn't eat. Just enjoy it. Food is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be an experience, a shared experience. Many cultures view it that way. We've tended to get away from that in the American culture, but I do want you to enjoy it. Now, as I wrap up, if you're considering a new approach to eating that fits your lifestyle, then here are a couple of tips. Number one, decide if it's something you want to do. I mean, really think about it, okay? Next, ease your way into it. And then number three, give it time. And make sure you pick the right time when you're not overly stressed, and make sure you have a support system in place to help you through that. So those are kind of the four things. Decide if it's something you want to do, ease your way into it, give it time to work, and make sure you pick the right time and support system. And I'll leave you with a couple of final thoughts. You know, we often go about changing our diet based on what we think we know. We think we're consuming too many calories because everyone tells us that we need to consume fewer calories to lose weight. And that may be partly true. Remember episode number 28, where we talked about calories and weight loss. But diet and nutrition are about more than calories. It's about more than weight loss too. If you want ground truth on what's right for you, nutritionally speaking, a registered dietitian is the only professional that can do that for you. That's the reason why I've partnered with registered dietitians, to get you to where you need to be in the safest manner possible. So you can head over to tdfitness.net/better nutrition, and it'll take you to the Better Nutrition page. And there, Ashley and Rachel, they have a host of resources for you. Some are free, some are paid, but on the paid ones even, you get a 20% discount with the TD Fitness code. So go ahead and check that out. And then next, you know, I'm a big picture guy, and as I zoom out and look at what I've been telling you and how it fits into what I want to provide for you holistically and overall, and more importantly though, how all of that fits into your overall approach to live healthier, you know, I look at it, and these past few episodes have focused heavily, almost exclusively, on nutrition. And that's for a number of reasons. Partly because you've told me that nutrition is what's important to you, so I want to honor that. Partly because last month was National Nutrition Month, so wanted some focus there. And because really, I think it's a vitally important topic when it comes to health and fitness. But when things like nutrition get a lot of attention, it's easy to assume that they're complicated or that they're difficult. But it's important to understand that nutrition is key, but I don't want you to get yourself in a frenzy over some perceived difficulty with healthy eating. Believe it or not, you are doing a lot of things right. I don't know if you've even heard that before, but you are, I can guarantee you. So build on those things and simply address the areas where you need a little bit of improvement. It's really that simple. Don't beat yourself up over it. Don't try to be perfect. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that you should deliberately plan times that you don't have to be perfect. Thinking back to episode number 9, the concept from the rest and recovery episode where I talked about periodic pauses. In the military, we call that a strategic pause. So deliberately planning those times that you don't have to be perfect. That's fine. Everybody needs a break, right? That doesn't mean to go off the reservation. Don't get crazy with it, but live life, okay? Understand that it's normal to have ups and downs. Accept that. Get over it, forgive yourself, and then get back to your healthy habits. That's what it's all about. Consistency over time, not perfection all the time. I'm going to leave you with that. Okay. The show notes for this episode can be found at tdfitness.net/030. And there you can listen, you can watch, you can read and grab the transcript, and you'll find links to all of the references from this episode. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in and for your time. I want you to have a blessed one. Coach T, out.